You cannot change somebody who doesn't have the intrinsic motivation, doesn't have that inner desire to change. And so many people can be stuck for years and years and years thinking if they just say things in the right way, if they just present enough information, then the partner will finally have the motivation to change. But unless your partner has been open to your influence, to being receptive to what you're bringing, then you need to take it at face value for what they're communicating.
All right, we are back for season 2. Welcome to the True Northing podcast. This is Kristen.
And Allison, so happy to be back with you all.
We are so happy after a brief break, necessary break, to just kind of breathe a little bit.
It's been such a full spring. I'm sure a lot of you have felt that way. Just the momentum of personal and professional demands, and just felt like it was so full. And I know a lot of people in my life, at least, were feeling that way. So needed to tend to lots of things, but also allow for the creative spark to have its timeline.
We have continued to receive a lot of great questions on the topic of emotional capacity in relationship. So we're excited to weave that into today's episode. One great question we got is, what if he seemed to have capacity at the beginning of the relationship when everything was starting and the commitment was forming and you agreed to marry him based on the person you were experiencing at that time who had capacity? And then later down the line, now that you've been married for several years, he seems to have less capacity and no interest in learning or growing in his capacity. What do you do? I think this is actually a really important question that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, because often the person that we experience in the beginning of the relationship is not the same person we experience later on once the relationship matures. When we meet someone who is a match for us and we're at the beginning of the falling in love stage or the romantic stage, we are being pumped full of all kinds of feel-good hormones, the bonding hormones. We are also, most of us, experiencing some form of projection where we have met somebody who, quote unquote, completes us or holds the aspects of self that we have lost or denied in ourselves. And so when we experience the other person, it's almost like this euphoric experience where we feel like we have found our match and the person who is going to help us become more whole. Of course, all of this is happening unconsciously, but because of those things, we are able to step out of our self-protection and our wounding and our adaptations and be really our best self. And we bring the best of ourselves to the other person as this connection forms.
The other kind of piece of this too is like that we miss or we discount red flags too.
Yes.
At the beginning.
Okay.
So the experience of love can also minimize some of the challenges because there's such a flooding of goodness, but then later those red flags, challenges, when you don't have the boost of all the love, they become more prominent as well.
So both people are more present. We are invested in building the relationship. We see the best in the other person. We feel like our best selves. We feel like we complete each other. There's a flood of hormones pumping through our bodies to support the attachment and the connection. We are invested in making it work. So, what do you do when you thought you were marrying someone who had a lot of capacity or wanted to grow with you, and it becomes apparent at some point that they not only don't have the capacity, but are not interested in growing their capacity.
Mm. What can happen over time in relationships as there's conflict, as there's challenge, as things happen between the couple is layers of protection that come in that shows up as defensiveness, denial, blame. And if you don't know how to deal with these things as they come up and have the foundation of a healing relationship, that can slowly pull people apart and degrade the nature of the relationship. Sometimes so much so that one person feels so unable to open up and relate in a way that is engaging and vulnerable and healthy for the relationship. So one person can shut down, both people can shut down and then start to become defensive instead of in that full capacity that they had. And if that person is able to recognize that and recognize that they've become defended, then there's an opportunity to work through that together and address that and build that capacity again over time. However, there are circumstances where the defenses are so high that the person has no interest or it doesn't feel safe or to open up and be engaged in that type of healing relationship anymore.
Often the relationship can keep people stuck in their defenses. And what I mean by that is we naturally are drawn to people who will trigger our wounding, who in some way kind of represent to our psyche the people who originally wounded us, which is our parents or whoever was raising us when we were forming our character as a child. So we're naturally drawn to those people, not because they're just like our parents, but because they have aspects that will remind us of that and remind us of our original wounding. And because of that, we all kind of naturally find us in this power struggle once the feel-good hormones go away, once we settle into the routine and everyday life stressors and, we've already have a commitment and we're married. And so we don't feel like we have to fight for the relationship anymore, whatever it is, all these reasons that we kind of get comfortable. Then the things in the beginning that we found really attractive because they felt like they completed us in some way or inspired us, then all of a sudden later down the line, when we're in this power struggle, those are the same things that become triggering to us. And we can become really locked in our defenses if our partner is doing certain things that are really triggering, really activate those defenses. So I say that because it's a relationship. It's a co-creation. And each person's energy plays off the other. And so there are lots of things that we are doing unconsciously to activate our partner's defenses. And that is a really important place to start. I think that is the starting place, is looking at yourself and the dynamic. What am I bringing to the energy field between us that might be causing him to maybe double down or shut me out or feel threatened or closed off to the idea of growing his capacity? Is there some way that I can bring a different kind of energy that could feel safer and more inviting? That's kind of step one. In some cases, you have already done that, and it doesn't really matter what you're bringing to the dynamic. His defenses are so strong and his capacity is so limited based on his wounding and his nervous system development that he is going to experience you as a threat no matter what you bring. And there's really no opening. Do you want to speak to that at all?
I did have just one distinction here regarding more narcissistic traits versus maybe more avoidant, which I think you're speaking to is more avoidant versus narcissistic, because narcissistic would be more an intentional shutting down, an intentional withholding, and there's no working with that. It's it's a disorder that's going to create havoc no matter what, and it was designed to kind of give at the beginning and then pull away, versus more avoidant is those defenses just so strong. And yeah, go ahead.
I'm so glad you brought that in because I was also thinking about how someone who's more on the severe narcissistic spectrum in the beginning of the relationship, it can be, like you were saying, more intentional deception, like trying to showing their best self, really a false self, in order to bring you in to the relationship and kind of hook you. And so, in that sense, in the beginning of the relationship, they seem like they have a lot of capacity because that's what they're showing you and that's what they are intentionally wanting you to experience, until they have you and the relationship matures, and then they can show their true colors.
Right. And devalue you and create harm and havoc in the relationship versus somebody who maybe felt more liberated at the beginning. They felt the love, they felt the connection that was really fueling for them. And then over time, they became more defended as more conflict and challenge and triggers came up. And so there's, as you said, there's the possibility, with a different approach that maybe they can open or soften or relate or go to therapy or be open to an idea. Or there's the possibility that they'll just be so walled off that they can't receive anything because you're a threat. And so if you've already done step one and they're open, great, then you can seek different kinds of therapy or seek different kinds of support for your relationship that can open that up and you begin the repair of the relationship.
And I would say it needs to be therapy or coaching or a retreat led by a coach. Like, there needs to be a third party to actually bring real openness and change, because the partner is the threatening thing
Mm,
to somebody's psyche. So if somebody is displaying low capacity, or they're really stuck in their wounding and reactivity in relationship and are closed off, if it's coming from the partner, like, hey, read this book, hey, I'm really wanting you to take accountability, or why do you think you might be like that, it typically, it's a no-go. So it's really helpful and important, I would say, to have a third party help with that process.
absolutely. And then if this question that came to us from a listener is more like, hey, I've tried everything and they're just totally walled off. What do I do now? At that point, I would say your choice right now is acceptance, is to accept your partner is not interested in healing with you. They're not interested in going on that journey, personally or through the relationship. And then from the acceptance, that opens up what's next. What is next is going to come from that process of acceptance. When you see things clearly, truly for what they are, is that something that you can navigate and choose to live with? Can you accept your partner and stay with them and find your own way with that reality? Or is that acceptance the information that you need to no longer be in the relationship? Because you cannot change somebody who doesn't have the intrinsic motivation, doesn't have that inner desire to change. And so many people can be stuck for years and years in years, thinking if they just say things in the right way, if they just present enough information, if they just A, B, C, D, E, F, G, then the partner will finally have the motivation to change. But unless your partner has been open to your influence, to being receptive to what you're bringing, then you need to take it at face value, what they're communicating.
Once you come to that place of acceptance, it opens up new questions for you to explore. You're no longer fighting against reality and trying to change reality. You're just acknowledging what is real, what is true, what is here, not denying, not fighting, not trying to change it or convince yourself that something else is going on. And then from there, from that acceptance and that clarity comes other questions to explore and decisions to make for yourself.
And feelings to feel. When there is that acceptance of the reality that the partner is not interested in having a healing relationship or developing their own capacity, and you stop trying to make them do that, then you are left with your own feelings about that. Because the conflict of trying to get the other person to change can be really distracting from those feelings that you have, such as possibly grief that the relationship isn't what you thought it was going to be. The person isn't who you thought they were. And your life is going to have to change one way or another because of that reality.
So true. It allows your feelings to come through, allows you to be with them, where before you get to acceptance, you're maybe not really feeling your feelings. You're distracting yourself with all these other behaviors and efforting to try to change things.
And the motivation to connect with your partner and to have this thriving relationship is a really noble thing to seek. And of course, that you want that. And it does take both people to create that kind of relationship.
And there are ways to be really strategic and thoughtful, I want to say, about how you approach your partner who's overwhelmed or feeling threatened by this idea of needing to change or needing to accept your influence. So you don't want to point out where they are limited or tell them the ways that they need to change, the ways that you need them to show up differently necessarily. If they are truly a highly defended, low capacity person, those kinds of statements are going to feel very threatening and reinforce the self protection. It's different to present it as this is a way I would really like us to grow together, or this is something I'm really interested in us doing together. Would you be willing to come with me? I'm hoping that we can deepen our connection, whatever it is, but in a way that really speaks to the desire rather than what they're lacking.
And that reminds me of, if you're that partner who's asking for that, there needs to be self-reflection if you are coming from a defended state as you're presenting these requests. Like, are you coming from fear or resentment or anger or blame? Or are you coming from a more resourced place that maybe you do have things that you're upset about, but you're able to communicate them in a way that sees the bigger picture, that sees the humanness, that's advocating for connection and love versus that power struggle that you had mentioned earlier on, of like, who wears the pants, who's going to be the one to dictate the direction of the relationship versus, hey, we're here in this dynamic. We both have our vulnerabilities and gifts. And, I'm going to resource myself and be here with myself and tend to myself in the ways that I need, know my limitations so that I can communicate this in a way that gives the result that I'm hoping for.
Right. Where am I in my nervous system? Can I come at this from a really regulated, loving place? Is that where my request is coming from, where my invitation is coming from? And chances are that's your best bet for an opening from the other person if you can come with that kind of energy.
Mhm.
And like you said, if you're coming with your own defenses and your own reactivity around the requests, well, then that's where the standoff is, right? You're both bringing that self protection, and you're probably not going to get a lot of willingness from the other person to participate.
And no matter how right you feel, no matter how right you are, no matter how valid your requests are, if they're coming from that maybe more self-protected place or that defended conflict focused face, it's going to be hard for you to get what you want. It's also important to note that there are situations that no matter how kind, caring, empathetic, and loving and sensitive you speak, your partner could still be defensive and not receptive to you.
We received another really great question that I think ties into this one beautifully, which is, should I help him heal or only seek partners who are already doing the work? So, in other words, should I work with somebody who I may be seeing has low capacity or a lot of wounding or really struggles with nervous system regulation? Should I be a part of helping them to grow their capacity? Or should I just see that as a red flag and really try to choose a partner who is already on their own healing or personal growth journey?
I would say it's such a spectrum. If somebody is incredibly low capacity and defended and struggles with a lot of areas in life, there's probably a lot of red flags there. But what's more important is whether the partner is open to the possibility of growing and they take in your influence. And what I mean by take in your influence is comes from the Gottman Institute, which is the most renowned research institute on relationships, where they conducted a decades long study about relationships and were able to predict with 98% accuracy or something along those lines whether a relationship was going to succeed or fail. And what they found were there were certain qualities that dictated the success of the relationship. And one of those qualities was both partners' ability to receive influence from the other partner. And actually, what's also fascinating is it's more important for a man to be open to the influence of his female partner, as that is more a predictor of the health of the relationship. And so, perhaps he could already even be on the healing journey, but he's not open to your influence. Or perhaps he's not on the healing journey, but is open and curious and available and interested.
Yeah, he doesn't have to already be reading the books and uh, diving into his own personal growth. Maybe that's just something that's never been on his radar, never been introduced to him. But this piece about accepting influence, I think, is so crucial to look out for. Is he open to things I share with him? And when I'm talking about what I'm learning about myself, is he intrigued by that? Does it cause him to reflect on himself? Can we have those conversations where I'm seeing his ability to reflect and maybe he's taking in information that I'm sharing. He's taking in my opinions or my curiosity about certain topics. And he's open. I can tell that he's willing to go on that journey.
Maybe you share with him a book that you found really transformational and he's interested and wants to read it. Maybe you share with him about a certain modality of therapy, such as Imago, which is couples therapy, and he looks into it and he learns about it. We're not talking about hand holding necessarily, like, oh, and now we're going to read this book. And now we're going to do this. And I'm going to introduce you to each new subject along the way. You share your interests, and then he shows his own interest in your interests and his own motivation.
Gosh, if I was in the dating scene today, I would approach it as an interview. I really would. I would be asking these really important questions to get a feel for how somebody would approach a relationship. One of them that's coming to mind, a question is, what do you think the purpose of relationship is? And it can sound kind of like a weird question. It's probably not a question that most people have considered. The purpose of relationship, right? Most people think, well, what do you mean? We fall in love and we start a family. That could be a purpose. But what do you mean? We're just supposed to be in a relationship. That's how life works. I would be looking for, if I'm myself, which I am interested in personal growth, I would be looking and listening for flavors of wanting to grow together, becoming our best selves together, inspiring, motivating, exploring each other's interests, things like that.
And when conflict arises, that there's a natural curiosity and care and compassion for each person and what's coming up, because all the good qualities are great. That's what we want to, that's what we strive for. That's the fruit and the goodness of the relationship. And yes, those things are often cultivated through moments of challenge as well. And I love that idea of approaching relationship as an interview process and to know yourself first. Like, what do you want in a relationship? And there can be so many assumptions. There are so many assumptions and expectations and ideals from each party of what a relationship is and what it looks like and how you guys handle all the different aspects of relating. But unless you have those conversations, those are then placed on the relationship without both people agreeing to them. And so to have those conversations, those interviews, then you really know, oh, that's what you think. Oh, that's what you want. Are we aligned on this? Are we open to the other person's idea? Where do we agree? Where are we different? And what do we do with those things?
And keeping in mind, as we've talked about before, we're bringing our best self to the beginning of a relationship. And if someone is actively seeking a partner or they're invested in this connection lasting, they might say really wonderful things that don't actually match up with what they truly value or how they behave. And so I wouldn't suggest offering, I am really into personal growth. How about you? How do you feel about it? Or if you do offer it that way, take the answer with a grain of salt because he might say, oh, yeah, I think that's awesome. I'm game, right? Whatever you want to hear. Don't just take in the words, Allie.
He's like, I love you doing personal growth.
Don't just hear his words. They're just words, right? Then I want you to notice the behaviors. Just notice how he operates in the world.
It's probably not a good idea to get in relationship with somebody at the start who has low capacity. Relationships require capacity.
This question is so curious to me because I don't know if this person is already in relationship or they're in the dating process and they're hoping to find partnership and they're wondering, who do I weed out? Do I see a low capacity man and do I move forward with this person and try to help them grow their capacity, or do I say no thank you? I would say no thank you.
Because yeah, if you've got a blank slate, like aim high.
Right, right. The part of the question tells me that maybe you don't believe you are worthy of a high capacity man. If part of you is saying, or that's part of your relationship template and your wounding is maybe I have to settle, I have to help someone heal. I don't know. I feel like we could go deeper on this question I'm really curious about where it's coming from. But yeah, if I could see a low capacity man in front of me, and we were just in the very beginning of relationship, yeah, I think I would say, I would set him free to go grow if he so chooses, but would not take that on. I have my own growing and healing to do. I don't need to get tied up in a situation where I'm going to be overcompensating and efforting to try to convince someone to participate in a relationship that requires capacity. Relationships are the vehicle for healing and growth. I believe that is their purpose. And we find someone who will help us, who will be able to help us heal and grow. But it has to be a reciprocal process where both people are coming in with that openness to, as you said, accepting each other's influence and to healing and growing and learning from each other and doing that process together. Typically, when you are getting into a relationship with what we are, calling a low capacity partner, they are not open to influence. They are not on the personal growth journey. They don't want your help. Typically, they don't see it as help. They see it as threatening. Your
Mhm.
wants, your needs, your requests are threatening. And so, should you help someone who doesn't really want help or can't receive help, or it's a situation where you are going to be helping them more than they help themselves, I say no. Why would you do that to yourself? It's not fair to you.
Right. You're not in a relationship to convince someone. If somebody is there with you and doesn't know what you know, but they're open to it, great. If you need to handhold, to mother, to convince, it's not
To
going to go well.
minimize minimize your needs, yeah, it's not
Yeah.
gonna go well.
Yeah. So, just like you said, Kristen, to reflect on yourself in your own worthiness of what patterns you have there that you need to convince someone to love you, that you need to overexert yourself, to overfunction, to go beyond what's healthy for you to get someone to be your match and work on that first.
And that is so key what you said, go beyond what's healthy for you. And I just wanna drive it home again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I just wanna make it really clear. Growing and healing together in relationship is a beautiful thing when both people want that and can bring the capacity for that. It's not that we expect perfect. We're not saying, yeah, you should find someone who is perfect and already healed. I mean, there is no perfect, but if you could find someone who's already done a ton of healing, beautiful. Wow, you'll have so much more ease in your relationship. But going through hard things and healing and growing together is a lovely thing and can be a very important part of being in relationship, and for a lot of people can only happen in relationship, but you have to have the right foundation for that to happen. And so if you can support your partner's growth while still holding on to yourself, holding on to your dignity, holding on to your self-care, holding on to your needs and the things that are important to you. You don't have to disappear or overwhelm yourself with the other person's needs. And you're not doing more than he's doing for himself and for the relationship. Then, that's a different thing that we're talking about.
Mm. You're not meant to lose yourself helping someone else find their way.
Amen, sister.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your questions. We love hearing them. And we hope this was a good reminder that no matter where you are in your relationship struggles, there are so many people who are right there with you experiencing something similar. It's just part of our journey of being human. We love you and we love your questions. Keep sending them, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you so much.